It begins with a single sound, a quiet knock that pierces a calm Belfast night. Kevin McMullan looks up from his tea. The room glows with the TV and a string of fragile Christmas lights. It feels like any ordinary evening. Two men in police uniforms stand beneath the porch light. "Mr. McMullan, there's been an accident. We need you to identify a body." He steps outside, worry tightening his throat. In the same heartbeat, a cold barrel presses into the back of his head. Inside, Karen chokes out a sound. A gloved hand clamps over her mouth. Her teacup explodes on the floor. The warmth of home disappears in an instant. Across the city, Chris Ward opens his door to a friendly voice asking about football tickets. It seems harmless. Then shadows move. Guns appear. Two men, two families, bound, silenced, terrified. By morning they will walk into their bank, smile at coworkers and, against their will, help pull off the largest bank robbery in British history. Kevin McMullan was never the kind of man who broke rules. He was the steady one, a husband who ironed his shirts on Sundays, a manager who arrived 10 minutes early every morning. People trusted him. In Belfast, that meant something. It meant loyalty, quiet dignity, keeping your head down and doing your job. That night, as he lay face down on his living room floor, with a gun pressed to his head, all that order vanished. The men holding him didn't shout. They didn't need to. Their calm was worse than rage. Every quiet command felt like a sentence written in stone. Upstairs, his wife Karen was forced to sit still, her hands shaking in her lap. One of the men told her she'd be looked after in another house. He said it gently, like a doctor breaking bad news. Then they taped her eyes shut. Kevin could hear her breathing through the panic, and he knew in that moment that whatever they wanted, he would do it. Across Belfast, Chris Ward was living the same nightmare. He was younger, still figuring life out, still dreaming about one day managing his own branch. That night he was with his parents, watching football, laughing, feeling safe. Then came the knock. A voice at the door, friendly, familiar. And when he opened it, everything ordinary collapsed into something he could never explain. 3 men stepped inside. The first smiled. The second raised a gun. The third locked the door. In an instant, his family's home became a cage. His mother's hands trembled around the teapot. His father froze. His girlfriend began to cry. Chris could only watch. They told him who they were. They told him they knew everything, where he worked, what time he started, what car he drove, who he loved. They said his family would live, as long as he followed every instruction. No mistakes, no hesitation. They gave him a phone with the letter C carved into the back. Kevin got one too, marked with a K. Each phone had a single number stored inside. One voice would control both of them. One plan would tie their lives together. The orders were simple, terrifyingly simple. Tomorrow, both men would go to work. They would act normal, unlock the vault, fill the bags, and walk out with millions in cash. Their families would be held until the job was done. Chris didn't say a word. He couldn't. His mind went blank, the way it does when you realize fear isn't a moment anymore, it's a place you live in. In that silence, the kidnappers began to clean. They wiped door handles, polished surfaces, erased every trace of their presence. No fingerprints, no evidence, no emotion. Just the quiet rhythm of cloth against wood, as 2 families sat paralyzed by the sound of their own breathing. Somewhere in that long night, something inside both men broke. Kevin stopped thinking about right or wrong. He thought only about his wife. Chris stopped thinking about escape. He thought only about survival. By morning, they would walk out of their homes like ghosts, calm faces hiding a terror no one at the bank would ever see. Tomorrow would be their day to work. But it would also be the day they became unwilling accomplices to the largest bank robbery in British history. The night stretched on like an endless shadow. Kevin sat on the edge of his couch, wrists tied. The cold barrel still close enough to feel. Every tick of the clock sounded louder than the last. The men guarding him didn't argue or threaten. They didn't need to. Fear had already done their work for them. One of them spoke with a quiet authority, laying out the plan piece by piece. Kevin listened, barely breathing, his mind racing between every word and the thought of his wife blindfolded somewhere in the dark. He tried to imagine her safe, but even that felt like a lie he couldn't afford to believe. In the kitchen, Chris Ward sat in a different house, living the same nightmare. His hands were bound behind his back, his family forced to sit together in silence. The only light came from the refrigerator, humming softly, casting a pale glow across the room. Every time the door creaked, his mother flinched. Every time a man moved, his father's breath caught in his throat. The kidnappers spoke in fragments. They whistled to each other, clicked their tongues, shuffled coins in their pockets, signals, codes, unspoken language between men who had done this before. They were patient, almost disciplined. They cleaned as they moved, erasing every trace of where they had been. It wasn't just control. It was pride. Hours passed like years. The men handed each hostage a can of beer, a strange gesture of calm in a night built on fear. Chris hesitated, then took it. Maybe he thought it would make him seem cooperative. Maybe he just needed something human to hold. At one point, Kevin asked where his wife was. The answer came without emotion. "She's fine. Do your part, and you'll see her again." He nodded, not because he believed it, but because disbelief was too dangerous. The two men, Kevin and Chris, didn't know each other well. One was a manager, the other a staff worker. Yet in that long Belfast night, they became bound by something far deeper than hierarchy, the fragile thread of survival. When the lead captor finally spoke again, his words were final. "Tomorrow will be your big day. You'll go to work, act normal, and do everything we say. If you fail, your families die." Then came silence. Heavy, suffocating, endless. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and the city slept, unaware that inside two quiet homes, two ordinary men were being prepared to play their parts in a crime that would humiliate an entire nation. Kevin closed his eyes and prayed for morning. Chris kept his open, afraid of what the dark might hide. Morning broke over Belfast, cold and gray. The streets were wet with mist, the kind that clings to windows and turns headlights into halos. Kevin drove in silence, his knuckles white on the wheel. Beside him sat Chris Ward, hollow-eyed, staring through the windshield as if the road could tell him what to do. Neither man spoke. What could they say? To the city, it was just another workday before Christmas. To them, it was a countdown. Kevin parked near the bank, fixed his tie, practiced a breath, and forced a smile that did not belong to him. Chris followed, heart pounding so loud it blurred the lobby noise. They walked in, greeted the receptionist, nodded at coworkers, and took their places like actors on a stage. Downstairs, the cash center sang its usual song. Machines counted. Printers hummed. The air smelled of paper and ink. Chris sorted bundles with steady hands and a drifting mind. Kevin checked ledgers he could not read. In their pockets, the special phones waited. When they buzzed, a single vibration, it felt like a hand closing around the throat. They made the 3 checkpoint calls, exactly as ordered. Each one was brief, stripped of personality. Still on track. Still obedient. Still alive. By late afternoon, the building began to empty. Kevin told the remaining staff there was a balance issue, and that he and Chris would do a full recount. It sounded routine, a manager being careful. Doors closed. Footsteps faded. The bank settled into a hush. 5 o'clock. The moment arrived. Kevin turned the final key on the main door. Chris met his eyes. No words. Only a nod that said, "Keep moving." They took the stairs to the basement, 2 keys in 2 trembling hands. The vault waited behind a wall of steel. 2 locks turned. A heavy seal gave way. The door opened with a slow breath. Inside was a small city of money, green boxes stacked in rows, labels aligned, everything in order until now. Kevin led Chris to the blind spot in the cameras, one only a manager would know. They cracked a box, swapped the metal seal, and began to fill the duffel the gang had given them. 50s, 100s banded tight, the bag growing heavy, the future thinning with every bundle. When it was full, Chris zipped it, lifted it, and for a single heartbeat both men froze. He walked out of the vault, through the corridor, past lenses that recorded nothing unusual. No alarms. No questions. Outside, the winter air felt sharper. At the bus stop on Upper Queen Street, he set the bag down and waited. 3 minutes. A hooded man approached, took the bag without a word, and disappeared into traffic. Relief did not come. The phone buzzed. The same calm voice, smooth as glass. "Good. Now go back and take more." The words hit harder than the gun ever had. Somewhere in the city their families were still held in the dark. Chris turned toward the bank and felt the weight of that truth settle on his shoulders. This was not the end of the job. It was the beginning of the robbery. The order came again, quiet but final. Go back. Take more. Chris stood in the cold night, phone pressed to his ear, heart pounding. Around him, Belfast kept breathing, unaware that a crime was unfolding beneath its streets. He turned and walked back toward the bank, his body moving before his mind could protest. Downstairs, Kevin waited by the vault, pale under the white light. When Chris arrived, they shared a look that said everything. Fear, exhaustion, acceptance. The kidnappers wanted more than a single bag. They wanted everything. The plan was cruelly elegant. Green seals meant cash. White seals meant waste. Swap them, and a fortune would look like garbage. It was the perfect disguise. They worked quickly, hands shaking as they loaded the trolleys. 24 boxes, each heavy with fresh notes. The air smelled of ink and dust. Kevin wiped sweat from his forehead. Chris kept counting, moving faster, afraid to stop. Upstairs, the night guard watched them on the monitor. Nothing looked strange, just two men finishing late before Christmas. When Kevin said a van was coming to collect the waste, the guard unlocked the gate without hesitation. 15 minutes later, headlights flared in the alley. A white van backed into the loading bay. The doors opened. Two men stepped out, faces hidden by caps, movements smooth, practiced. No words. Only work. They lifted the boxes one by one, stacking them inside the van. The sound of metal wheels scraping concrete echoed through the basement. 7 minutes later, nearly 19 million pounds were gone. When the last box slid inside, one of the men looked at Kevin. That's it. You did well. Go home. His tone was almost kind. It made Kevin's stomach turn. The van pulled away. Red taillights faded into the mist. Silence filled the hallway. Chris leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. Kevin placed a hand on his shoulder. Neither spoke. The phone buzzed again. Another voice, this time cold, measured. There is more. You are not finished. They turned back to the vault. No more boxes, no more disguises. Just black bags and handfuls of used notes, euros and pounds mixed together. They filled each bag as fast as they could, knowing the guard could walk in at any second. When the van returned, they loaded the final haul, 5 million more. No alarms. No questions. Just the sound of doors closing. And then, nothing. Somewhere in the city, two families waited in the dark, praying that this would be the last time the phone would ring. The night ended, but silence did not bring peace. Kevin and Chris drove through Belfast with empty hands and hollow hearts. The money was gone, the van was gone, and somewhere their families waited in the dark. At 8:10, Kevin called the police. His voice shook as he spoke. I have just been forced to rob my own bank. Officers were already on their way. A young couple had seen a white van leaving the alley, but by the time police arrived, it had vanished. Inside the vault, they found nothing but air. 26.5 million pounds gone without a sound. No alarms. No broken locks. Just two men sitting in shock, unable to explain how it happened. Detectives questioned them for hours. Kevin looked lost, replaying every moment of that night. Chris spoke softly, eyes unfocused, like someone who hadn't slept in years. Both told the same story, and both were released. There was no evidence, no trail to follow. Days later, their families were found alive but shaken. Karen had been left blindfolded in a cabin miles away. Chris's family had been held in silence, waiting for a door that never opened. The Northern Bank stood still, its walls holding the echo of a crime no one could understand. Reporters called it perfect. But for Kevin and Chris, there was nothing perfect about it. They were alive, yet not free. Because fear like that never ends. It follows you home. It waits behind every door, quiet, patient, and unforgettable. Police flooded Belfast with searches and questions, but every lead ended in silence. 13 arrests. Dozens of raids. No proof. No trace. The robbers had vanished with the same precision they used to plan the crime. Kevin and Chris were cleared, yet never truly free. Every whisper in the street, every look from a neighbor reminded them that some people will always doubt. Both men withdrew from the world, living quietly, haunted by what fear had made them do. The money never returned. Not a single note surfaced. Some believed it funded politics. Others said it was buried in foreign soil. The truth dissolved into rumor. leaving only questions that time refused to answer. For Kevin and Chris, the real prison wasn't a cell. It was memory. Nights were long. The sound of a knock still made their hearts stop. The Northern Bank Robbery became legend, a story whispered in bars and classrooms, proof that the perfect crime is not the one that steals money, but the one that steals peace. This is Secret Files. If you believe some truths are too dark to stay hidden, subscribe, and join us as we uncover the stories the world tried to forget.